What is up? My name is Matt Workman for Cinematography Database, and today we're going to be looking at a sci-fi urban night exterior. Now, when would you see a scene like this? You would see them in what I would say is kind of like a modern sci-fi, so something like a Star Trek, a Star Wars Rogue One, Blade Runner, which is not modern, but movies like that, you're going to see scenes like this, and we're going to be talking about some of the high-level concepts when it comes to approaching lighting these types of scenes. I think this is going to be applicable and helpful for anyone no matter what level you're at, even if you're not producing something that is this gigantic of a scene. I think that if you wanted to do this sort of look on a smaller scale, then I'm going to cover the things that you're going to need to do to be able to do just that. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Sci-Fi Urban Night Exterior. Now, this scene is very dark at the moment. Do not adjust your monitors. This is on purpose. I am going to be adding lights one by one so I can show you and talk about what each light is doing for the scene. And this first light source that we have here is twilight. So it is just the sky. So this is the sky after the sun has gone down, but the sun is still basically bouncing into the atmosphere, sort of, that's not scientific, but what's happening is you're getting this very blue soft light from overhead, basically from everywhere. This is very safe to call this ambient light. So we can basically call this ambient. This is the ambient light, and it is from the sky with the sun down, so there's no sunlight, just skylight, and it is going to be anywhere from, I'd say, 10,000 to 20,000 Kelvin. So very blue. Very, very blue. And the lighting is going to look something like this. Now, it's hard to see here, so I'll kind of draw it out. Here is some buildings, right? So it's urban, it's a city, and everything is very dark right now. But the things to call out are this floating Blade Runner inspired vehicle over here, and that's what makes it sci-fi, is there's a floating car in the background with lights on it. So these are like LEDs or some sort of glowing light source from like the sirens. And what's important to call out here is that on this type of setup, it's really great to have a shiny floor. And we kind of talked about shiny floors on the white psych video, but there's a lot of ways to do this. On something this big, it's likely going to be a kind of cement or pavement type floor situation. And then what you're going to need to do is get it wet. Getting it wet will create a thin layer of water across the entire thing that will be reflective. So that's what's going on here. Our dark scene, here's our person here. I know it's very dark, this is on purpose, and this is our Fisher dolly here. We're going to be visualizing this today with an Alexa, and we're going to be using a 50mm. Well, yeah, it's kind of a 50mm anamorphic lens. So let's look through the camera. Here is our behind the scene shot, and here is through the camera. Again, very dark. I hope you can see something, but you'll see here that we have very anamorphic bokeh and distortion going on back here. So we have kind of a vertical distortion as well as just a very shallow depth of field, and we can very lightly see a little bit of top light on our talent right here. And we can see that everything is getting this very even top light, but the floor stays very dark, and all that's really coming up in the floor are the reflections of the light. I'm going to cheat for just a second here, and I am going to throw on a color correct here so you can kind of see a little bit more of what's happening. I'm opening the scene up. This is what's under there. So this is what happens if you opened up the camera quite a bit. You opened up like 2 stops, you would see this. But we don't want the daylight, or we don't want the ambient skylight to be this bright. We actually want it to be this bright. And I will be showing you why in just a second. So let's move on to our first phase of adding lights to the scene, and that is adding practicals. Now, these are very specific practicals. They're not practicals like we're going to be doing next. They are essentially windows, right? So these are windows that are going to be pretending like there's people in them, or it's a storefront. That's kind of what I see. And a couple things happen when we turn on these practical lights, or these fluorescents. We have this lighter green light here, and that's reflecting on the floor, but we may not see that in the shot. But the light from this is going to be shooting all the way across to this building. So now this building is getting lit up by these windows, just like that. And also, you can see there's a little bit of a reflection of that light in our talent's face. Now, he's actually in front of those buildings, so he's not getting much direct light from them. There's a little bit, but a lot of this lighting here is purely reflected. So we have, by adding these fluorescents on, we have a green source now, or fluorescents, these practicals. We have this green reflection down here, and that lights this wall, and it also puts a reflection in our person's, in our talent's face. So let's look through the camera. Very cool. I like this look a lot. This is a very dark look. You can almost get away with just this, but we're going to keep adding lights to this scene, and we're actually going to end up overlighting the scene in my opinion, but I want to just show you all the different pieces. It's up to you to kind of choose what mood seems the best for the project you're on. If this works for you, that's great. But again, let's call this out really quickly. We have the green reflections in the floor here from our wet pavement. We have a little bit of green light on our Talon's face and nose, and then this side of the set is getting lit up completely by those practical lights. I'm calling them practical lights. Practical lights normally means like a lamp, but I call anything in the scene that's emitting light a practical because you can see it in the shot. So let's flick between this shot and the original. So here is just the ambient, just the skylight, very dark, but there's nice blue base to everything. And then we turn on that fluorescent, and the lights, the wall over here is getting lit up. We have these nice bright windows, they're reflecting in the car, and we also have the reflections on the floor and a little bit of edge light on our Talon. Let's look at it one more time here. Lights on, lights off. Lights on, lights off. So very cool. I like this look a lot. I would actually go with this for certain scenes, but we're going to add another layer of lighting, and that's going to be more practicals. And this time, the practicals are going to be red. So, just like our green lights over here, the red lights are reflecting into the floor here. Now, this is a perfectly smooth, reflective floor. This is not what it's going to look like in real life. There's going to be a lot more bumpiness and broken up patterns, but for this example, I tried to keep it very smooth so everyone can see it. This would be essentially working on like a plexi floor, which is not realistic for a scene this big. I mean, not really. And what these sources are, which is not 100% clear here, these are 4-foot KinoFlow tubes, and there's a bunch of them all the way down here. It's kind of like how a hotel or motel would light, so there's just a fluorescence stuck up on the ceiling, and you see the fluorescence, and they are gelled red. Now, what's kind of happening in the movie world is we're moving away from tungsten and fluorescence. I mean, you're still going to see them on set because people have so many of them, but what would likely be done on a modern feature is that these would actually be LEDs inside of a tube. So these could either be 4-foot fluorescent tubes or 4-foot LED tubes that are red. So I really like this red. Contrasting with blue, I believe red and green are opposite colors on the color wheel. I feel like I should know that. Yep, I'm looking at them. I'm looking at it right now. They are opposite colors, so that is really nice here. That's a nice color contrast that's happening. A little bit Christmassy. It's a little bit Christmassy. I didn't mean to do that, but let's look at it through the lens. So very cool. We have our red edge light going here, and we have our green edge light there. And under all of this is this very subtle blue that's in everything. So you see that this white shirt, it's actually a little bit blue. There's blue in everything. It's very subtle. So we do not have a white ambient. We have a blue ambient, and that gives all the shadows, and I think the scene overall, some nice blue tone to the whole thing. You don't have to color correct this if you shoot it that way. So let's look at the progression so far. We have gone from this shot from here. So this is the green light only, and we added the red light. Green light, red light. All sorts of funny things are coming out of these color choices. It's Christmas, and it's also a throwback to being in kindergarten. So the last thing we're going to add, and this is questionably over-lighting the scene in my opinion, but I wanted to add it in here. We're going to add this 24-inch fluorescent, I keep saying fluorescent. We're going to add this 24-inch lantern light, and now inside of it could be a tungsten bulb, which is possible, but even more likely is going to be more LEDs. So Light Gear, I think Source Maker makes them as well. LEDs, you just put them in a lantern and you can dim them, you can change the color. It's a lot more flexible. You can change the color temperature depending on the type of LEDs. Really, really nice source. Likely going to put an eye light in the person's eye, and it's just going to add a little bit of white light back to the Talon. This is if you're dealing with like kind of an A-list actor or someone that you don't want to be in silhouette and be all green and red. I actually got in trouble in a music video for lighting the Talon green and not adding white light, so I would always say have something like this safe in the background. Get ready to pull it out if all of a sudden people want to be able to actually see the person and have them not look sickly and green. But if you're going for a cool dark look, I think that the last look looked really good. So here's our scene with the blue ambient, the white key light from the lantern, our green and red practicals. And you can see how this all blends into a reflection on the floor. That's really key to this. I think you see a lot of this in sci-fi movies where there's shiny floors because the reflections look so cool, they're so glossy, it just makes everything look awesome. And what we could also add here is a flare, but I'm just not going to do it for this demo. I think on some of the artwork I'd released on Instagram. For those of you who don't know, if you like the show, definitely follow us on Instagram. I typically kind of workshop and make kind of fun renders throughout the week to kind of test things out. And the one I like the best, that's what I typically end up making this show about. On my Instagram and Facebook, we definitely had flares in this, but I'm just not going to add a flare to this scene. So let's go through the whole progression. So that is all the lighting for this scene. We're going to do a quick recap of the different phases of the lighting, and then we're going to look at an overhead to kind of get another view of this scene. So here we are all twilight, all blue ambient light, very dark, but still these fluorescent, these practicals are reflecting in the floor. Very cool, very sci-fi. Next, we turn on our green window lights. More reflections, green edge light, lights up the building across the street. Then we add the red lights. The red lights are more reflections and they add a little bit of fill over there. Also, a green rim light on our talent. This would be a very cool dark scene if you can get away with that, kind of like a dark noir or very moody type movie. But if we need to just have it be a little bit nicer, a little bit kinder on everybody, we can add this 24-inch LED lantern and add a little bit of white light back onto our talent. This also, it looks nice. I mean, I think it gives us a reference point to this red and green because we have white light on our talent, and that's always a nice approach. So to wrap this whole thing up, this is a little bit new, is we're going to look at an overhead here. So this is an overhead of the set we were just looking at. So very small down here is our camera. This is our talent, and this is our lantern. This is our Blade Runner inspired vehicle, and then this is how deep the scene really is. I mean, this is a big set. I don't have like the exact measurement. It's looking like a couple 100 feet at least. Maybe 200 feet, something like that. 200, 300 feet. I'll say 200 feet for now. I could have measured it in Cinema Designer, but I didn't. You can see on this side of the scene, we have all these red fluorescents, and they looked very cool. And then on this side, we have our green practicals. And that is the lighting setup for this scene. That is the close-up that we were doing on a 50mm anamorphic. So that is going to wrap it up for this episode. I hope you enjoyed looking at this sci-fi urban night exterior and a breakdown of the lighting. I think that if you are doing a one-star production, you need to just go out in the world, in New York City, Times Square, Chinatown, if you're in somewhere that's a downtown where it has a lot of practicals and fluorescence, that you can get this look basically for free. Now, if you're on a 2-star, you still basically have to go find the location. As you get to the 3 and the 4-star, you can either take a location like this and actually put the lights out there and wet the street down, or if you're on a 4-star, you could just build this whole thing on a stage or do it virtually on a green screen. So these lighting principles, these techniques, this concept of lighting, of mixing practicals with blue ambient, this is something that can be done basically almost on any budget. The visuals for this episode were created in Cinema Designer, which is a plugin for Cinema 4D that allows directors, DPs, and basically anybody to visualize real-world based camera work and lighting, and that's exactly what we did here. I used Cinema Designer to create this scene, and I was able to illustrate and communicate some lighting and camera concepts that would be pretty much impossible any other way. You can learn more about that at cinemadesigner.com. If you liked this episode, subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and leave us a comment below on what type of lighting you'd like to see broken down in this fashion. It could be from a movie, from a commercial, from a music video. Try to pick one scene, and if enough people like it, and it's something that I think I can accomplish fairly easily, I will break it down. And I'm challenging you. Give me something hard. I think I can break down pretty much any scene from any movie or commercial. That's my challenge to you. So I will see you guys on the next episode. Get out there and plan better, shoot better, and follow us on Instagram at CinematographyDB. We do a lot of pre-show content on Instagram. It's a lot of fun, so follow us there too. I'll see you guys on the next one.